A thick fog clung to the ground like a shroud as Claire drove down the winding road. The dense forest loomed on either side, its darkened branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Her old car's headlights struggled to pierce the mist, casting eerie shadows that danced across the trees. Claire had taken a wrong turn somewhere, lured off the main highway by the promise of a shortcut on her GPS. Now, she was hopelessly lost in a labyrinth of backroads. Her phone had lost signal miles back, and the fuel gauge was perilously close to empty. Panic began to set in as she realized she might have to spend the night in this desolate place. The forest had a reputation, one that the locals in the nearby town spoke of in hushed tones. They called it the Whispering Woods, a place where people had vanished without a trace. Legends spoke of restless spirits that roamed the forest, seeking to lure the unwary into its depths. Claire had dismissed these tales as superstitious nonsense, but now, surrounded by the oppressive darkness, she wasn't so sure. As she rounded a bend, the car sputtered and came to a halt. She turned the key in the ignition, but the engine only coughed in response. Cursing under her breath, Claire stepped out of the car, the cold air biting through her thin jacket. She fished a flashlight from the glove compartment and began to walk, hoping to find a house or a passing car. The forest was unnervingly quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves under her feet. The beam of her flashlight flickered, and she smacked it against her palm to keep it steady. After what felt like an eternity, she saw a faint light through the trees. Relief flooded her as she quickened her pace, heading toward the glow. The light led her to a small, dilapidated cabin. Its windows were dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking in the slight breeze. Claire hesitated at the threshold, a sense of foreboding washing over her. But with no other option, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was empty, its interior coated in a thick layer of dust. A fireplace stood at one end, cold and unused for years. As she explored, she found an old oil lamp and some matches. Striking one, she lit the lamp, its warm glow casting long shadows on the walls. She set it on a table and sat down, trying to calm her racing heart. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the trees like a mournful wail. Claire shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. She was about to drift into a fitful sleep when she heard it, a faint whisper, just on the edge of hearing. She froze, straining to catch the words. "Come, follow." The voice was ethereal, barely more than a breath. Claire's skin prickled with fear. She scanned the room, but there was no one there. The whisper came again, more insistent this time. "Come, follow." She stood, her legs trembling. Against her better judgment, she found herself moving toward the door, drawn by the voice. The forest outside was alive with shadows, shifting and swirling in the fog. She stepped into the night, the whisper guiding her deeper into the woods. The further she walked, the louder the whisper became, until it was a chorus of voices, all urging her onward. The trees closed in around her, their branches clawing at her clothes. She stumbled, her flashlight flickering and dying, leaving her with only the faint glow of the lamp. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The silence was deafening, pressing in on her from all sides. Claire turned in a circle, trying to get her bearings, but the forest was a maze of identical trees. Panic rose in her chest as she realized she was hopelessly lost. Then she saw it, a figure standing just at the edge of her vision, shrouded in mist. It was tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Claire's breath caught in her throat as the figure began to move toward her, gliding silently over the ground. "Who are you?" she called out, her voice trembling. The figure didn't answer, its eyes locked onto hers. Claire backed away, but her feet tangled in the underbrush, and she fell. The lamp slipped from her grasp and shattered, plunging her into darkness. The figure loomed over her, its eyes burning like coals. Claire tried to scream, but no sound came out. The whispers returned, a cacophony in her mind, drowning out her thoughts. She felt a cold hand touch her forehead, and her vision swam. When she awoke, she was lying on the forest floor, the morning sun filtering through the trees. Her car was a short distance away, its engine idling. Disoriented, she stumbled to her feet and made her way back to the road. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The figure stood at the edge of the forest, watching her with those haunting eyes. She pressed the accelerator, the car speeding away from the whispering woods. Claire never spoke of that night again, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her out of the forest, something that now whispered to her in the dead of night, a constant reminder of the terror she had escaped. Weeks passed, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The whispers that had haunted her in the whispering woods now lingered in her apartment, echoing faintly in the quietest moments. She tried to convince herself it was her imagination, a lingering trauma from that terrifying night, but deep down, she knew something had followed her home. One evening, as she sat on her couch, flipping through channels to distract herself, the lights flickered. Her breath caught in her throat as the television screen went black, replaced by a snowy static. The whispers grew louder, swirling around her in a ghostly cacophony. "Come, follow." She clutched the remote, her knuckles white, and desperately hit the power button. The screen went dark, but the whispers remained, now accompanied by a cold draft that seemed to seep from the walls. Claire stood, her heart pounding, and scanned the room. In the corner, where the shadows pooled deepest, a pair of glowing eyes emerged. Claire froze, unable to look away. The figure from the forest stood there, its skeletal frame barely visible in the darkness. It didn't move, but the whispers intensified, filling her mind with their insistent plea. "Come, follow." Claire backed away, her thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear and confusion. She stumbled into her bedroom and slammed the door, but the whispers penetrated the wood, seeping into her mind. She covered her ears, but it was no use. They were inside her head, relentless and unyielding. Desperation drove her to seek help. She visited a therapist, but her stories of the whispering woods and the haunting presence were met with skepticism and polite concern. Friends and family grew distant, unable to understand the terror she faced. Isolated and desperate, Claire turned to research, delving into local legends and folklore. She learned that the whispering woods had a dark history, one that stretched back centuries. The forest was said to be a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin, where restless spirits roamed, seeking to ensnare the living. There were tales of a malevolent entity known as the Watcher, a spirit that lured people into the forest and claimed their souls. Claire's encounters with the Watcher intensified. It no longer confined itself to shadows and whispers. She would catch glimpses of it in mirrors, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. Objects in her apartment would move on their own, and doors would open and close without cause. Sleep became a rare commodity, as nightmares plagued her every time she closed her eyes.